I still remember the morning it all began to unravel. The kind of morning that starts quietly, with sunlight streaming through half-closed blinds and the smell of salt and seaweed drifting faintly from the shore. I had poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam curling around my face like a soft embrace, and I was just settling into my favorite chair in the living room of my beach house. The house I had poured decades of love, hope, and memories into, when the phone rang. At first, I thought it was just another call from a telemarketer or a wrong number, but when I saw the unfamiliar area code, a tight knot of unease formed in my stomach. Something about it felt wrong. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. "This your name?" the voice on the other end asked, a strange mixture of hesitancy and urgency threading through it. I said cautiously, "Who is this?" The line went quiet for a heartbeat that felt like a year. Then the words hit me harder than any blow I've ever felt. "I think you should know your beach house has been sold." Sold. My mind froze like my thoughts had been trapped in ice. Sold? That didn't make sense. How could that be possible? I had lived here, had raised my family here, had spent countless summers laughing, crying, and dreaming within these walls. Every corner of this house held a story. The scratch on the kitchen floor from when my son learned to skate indoors, the faded photograph of my parents on the mantel, the tiny handprints etched into the cement of the patio railing by my daughter years ago. Sold. Someone had taken all of that away from me, without a single word, without even a hint of warning. I dropped the mug in shock. Coffee sloshed across the hardwood floor, dark stains spreading like the chaos inside me. The voice on the phone continued, cautiously, "I'm the buyer. I didn't want to keep this from you, I just thought." I wasn't listening. My vision blurred, not just from the sudden adrenaline, but from a raw, visceral mix of anger and disbelief. Betrayal. That was the word now clawing at my chest. And as the realization sank in, so did the horrifying truth. The betrayal didn't come from some faceless stranger. No, this wound had been crafted by hands I should have been able to trust. I thought of my son, the one I had raised with care, the one who swore he would protect the family, the house, the memories. And then my mind flicked to my sister, my closest confidant, the one who always knew when something was wrong. And I remembered the fleeting messages, the evasive answers, the half-truths, each a breadcrumb leading me unknowingly into this trap. Someone I loved, someone I trusted, had sold my sanctuary while I slept peacefully in ignorance. The house, my heart, my history, all gone in a paper signature I hadn't seen, a document I hadn't been allowed to read. I sank to the floor, my back against the sofa, letting the shock wash over me like a cold, relentless wave. I couldn't breathe. My mind, usually so orderly and calm, now raced through every interaction of the past months, every conversation I'd had, every time someone had forgotten to mention something. Each memory now reeked of deceit. I could almost see the lies curling in the air around me like smoke, their tendrils touching everything I held dear. And yet, even as my heart pounded in betrayal, a sliver of disbelief persisted. Surely there had to be some mistake, perhaps a mix-up in the records, perhaps someone else had the same name. Surely someone I trusted wouldn't do this, would they? But even as I clung to that desperate hope, the voice of reality whispered in the corners of my mind. Yes, they would. They did. And the proof was out there, somewhere, in the legal paperwork that transferred everything I had ever treasured into the hands of a stranger. The morning passed, though time seemed both frozen and accelerated at once. I wandered through the empty rooms, touching surfaces as if I could summon the past into the present by will alone. The scent of the ocean still lingered, the sunlight still played across the worn wooden floors, but nothing felt the same. My home, my memories, my sanctuary, it had been turned into someone else's possession, and no matter how many times I blinked or rubbed my eyes, the reality didn't change. The contrast was unbearable. What was once warmth and comfort now felt cold, alien, and hostile. I tried to call my son. The phone rang and rang. No answer. My sister, the same. Their messages went straight to voicemail, the words I wanted, truth, explanation, apology, now trapped in the invisible space between us. And as I stood there, the full weight of isolation settled on my shoulders. I realized that in this cruel twist, not only had I lost my home, but I had lost the very people I had believed were allies, protectors, confidants. And yet, despite the grief, a small spark of determination flickered within me. I could not let this end with despair. Hours later, the unexpected call returned, a lifeline thrown across the chasm of betrayal. The buyer, whose name I didn't yet know, spoke carefully, almost apologetically. I had no part in their deception. I tried to reach you first. I didn't want you to wake up to this in shock. I thought maybe we could fix some of this together. The words were strange, almost surreal. I didn't know this person, yet they were offering something that felt impossible. Honesty, integrity, a hand extended in a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. My instinct told me to hang up, to retreat, to shield myself from further pain, but another part, the part that had always been stubborn, resolute, made me stay on the line. We spoke briefly, fragments of conversation that hinted at the possibility of reclaiming what had been lost, or at least understanding it. But even in those moments, I knew the path forward would not be easy. There would be confrontation. There would be reckoning. And most of all, I would have to face the people I loved and had trusted, knowing that somewhere in their hearts, greed, fear, or desperation had eclipsed loyalty. As the call ended, I sat in silence, staring at the walls that had once been mine. The house was still standing. The ocean still roared just beyond the window, but everything had shifted. I felt the first stirrings of what would become a relentless determination, to uncover the truth, to confront the betrayal, and to fight, not just for a house, but for the integrity of my life and the memories that no one could sell. That morning, I realized something profound. Betrayal has a sound. It is not loud or explosive. It is quiet, insidious, creeping into the spaces where trust once lived. And yet, even in betrayal, even in the shock of loss, there is a choice. Weakness is optional. Strength is available. Courage is a decision. And for the first time in hours, I chose to rise, not in despair, but in quiet, simmering determination. I wandered to the patio, the familiar boards creaking beneath my feet. The ocean stretched before me, endless, unyielding, yet breathtakingly beautiful. It reminded me of something essential. Life continues. People will disappoint. Circumstances will twist unexpectedly. But the core of who we are, the integrity we cling to, the memories that define us, cannot be stolen unless we allow them to be. And as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of defiance and hope, I realized that my story was far from over. The betrayal was just the beginning. The shock was the spark. And the mysterious call from the buyer, that strange, honest voice, was the first thread of possibility in a tangled web I was only beginning to untangle. I didn't know what lay ahead. Confrontations loomed, difficult conversations, and decisions that would test every fiber of my character. But for the first time that day, as the waves crashed below and the wind tugged at my hair, I felt it. The glimmer of hope, fragile yet unyielding, whispering that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way to reclaim not just the house, but my life, my dignity, and my future. The next days passed in a haze of planning, nerves, and quiet determination. I had spent hours packing the small apartment I had moved to after the shock, phone calls with the buyer still ringing in my mind like a lifeline. His voice, calm, measured, and somehow unwavering, had offered a path through the chaos. A strange alliance had formed between us, built not on familiarity but on a shared sense of justice. He didn't know my family, didn't owe me loyalty, yet he had chosen honesty over convenience, integrity over greed. That contrast, between the people I trusted blindly and this stranger who acted with clarity, struck me harder than any betrayal ever could. I had to see them. I had to confront the people who had sold my house, the ones whose hands had orchestrated this betrayal. And so, with a trembling mixture of fear and resolve, I drove to the familiar streets that had once felt like home. Each turn of the wheel, each familiar landmark, was a reminder of everything I had loved and lost. The contrast was unbearable. Streets I had walked in joy, now pathways to confrontation. My chest tightened with anticipation, adrenaline mixing with a lingering sorrow that refused to leave. When I arrived, I hesitated at the door, hand poised over the handle. What would I say? What would I feel? Anger surged, a wave threatening to sweep me under, but so did something else. A deep, aching curiosity about why they had done it. Greed, fear, misunderstanding, or some perverse sense of rightness in their own minds. My fingers pressed against the door, hesitated, and then knocked. They answered. The moment their eyes met mine, I saw the flash of recognition, followed immediately by defensiveness, avoidance, and guilt poorly disguised. My daughter, who I had imagined laughing and crying in this house, stood before me with an expression I didn't recognize. There was a shift in the air, like a current of tension I could feel in my bones. And in that instant, the contrast became painfully clear. The warmth of family love versus the cold, deliberate actions that had taken it away. I spoke first, my voice steady despite the quivering inside. Why? The single word carried the weight of every stolen memory, every betrayal, every sleepless night I had endured since discovering the sale. And yet, it demanded more than an answer, it demanded truth. Her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and defensiveness. I didn't mean for it to happen this way, she stammered, glancing at her husband. We thought we were helping, we thought we were making things easier for everyone. I took a step closer, heart pounding in my chest. Easier? Easier for whom? For you? For the money? Or for me? My home, my memories, my life, was that easier for anyone? Silence fell, thick and suffocating. And in that silence, I realized the confrontation was only beginning. There would be negotiations, emotional, moral, and perhaps legal. Each word spoken, each admission made would test courage, patience, and empathy. We sat down, the buyer having arranged to meet discreetly, a neutral witness and potential ally in this emotionally charged negotiation. His presence was a silent reassurance, a reminder that integrity still existed in a world that had so recently seemed devoid of it. He didn't interfere, didn't judge. He simply existed as a steady force, a grounding point in the storm. The discussion began cautiously. I listened, probing gently, asking questions that cut to the heart of motives. Slowly, layer by layer, the truth emerged. My daughter-in-law had acted out of desperation, believing that selling the house would solve financial pressures I hadn't fully understood. My son had deferred to her, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of misplaced loyalty. The betrayal had not been born purely of malice. It had been tangled with fear, necessity, and a lack of foresight. Hearing this didn't erase the pain. It didn't magically restore the laughter that had once filled the halls. But it added nuance to my anger, and slowly it shifted the balance from blind rage to measured confrontation. I could see their humanity now, their flaws and failings, their desperate attempts to do what they thought was best, even as they harmed me in the process. The contrast between their weakness and my emerging strength became undeniable. I was still hurt, yes, but I was also empowered, ready to navigate the next steps with clarity rather than emotion alone. Negotiation followed. Legal documents were reviewed, options were laid out, and slowly, inch by painstaking inch, a path forward began to appear. The buyer's guidance was invaluable. He knew the legal landscape, the practical steps to reclaim ownership or, at the very least, secure equitable solutions. Each conversation, each clarification, strengthened my resolve, and I began to feel a sense of control returning, a balance slowly restoring itself to the chaos of betrayal. But the emotional journey was far from over. I had to confront more than paper and signatures. I had to confront my own feelings. Could I forgive? Could I understand their fear, their errors, their lapses in judgment? Could I reconcile the loving memories with the harsh reality of deceit? Each reflection brought waves of grief, anger, and then, slowly, empathy. And in that empathy, I found unexpected strength, the kind that doesn't roar but builds quietly, a foundation for resilience and redemption. As the hours passed, conversations deepened. I learned truths I hadn't anticipated. The subtle pressures, the hidden fears, the moments where my daughter-in-law's decisions had been driven not by greed, but by a distorted sense of protection, of survival. And my son, usually so confident, so sure, revealed vulnerability I hadn't allowed myself to see before, a human weakness that made him both fallible and relatable. Moral contrasts were stark: fear versus integrity, survival versus loyalty, weakness versus courage. And within those contrasts, the lessons emerged. Through it all, the buyer remained a silent pillar. We exchanged glances occasionally, brief nods of understanding, small moments of shared acknowledgement that we were both navigating something larger than ourselves. He had called me first, chosen honesty over expedience, and his loyalty in that moment contrasted sharply with the betrayal I had endured. Slowly, I realized he wasn't just an ally, he was proof that goodness and integrity still existed in the world, a mirror reflecting the path I could take in the darkness of disappointment. By late afternoon, the negotiations had taken shape. A resolution was forming, a return of rights, agreements to restore ownership where possible, and a framework for future communication and accountability. It wasn't simple, it wasn't clean. But it was a beginning, a restoration of balance, a way to reclaim what had been lost, not just the house, but the dignity, clarity, and control over my life. The final confrontation came quietly, a conversation that combined honesty, apology, and acknowledgement of mistakes. Tears were shed, hands shaken, voices steady yet filled with emotion. It was raw, imperfect, and deeply human, a testament to the messy, complicated nature of family, trust, and love. And when the last words were spoken, a strange relief settled over me, a lightness I hadn't expected. Not just because the house was within reach again, but because the moral clarity had returned. Betrayal had been confronted, fear had been addressed, and integrity had found its place again. Standing once more in the house I had reclaimed, I felt the sunlight on the floors, the familiar scent of salt air through the windows. The walls still held memories, the creaks and groans of age still whispered past laughter, and yet the house now felt like mine again, not because of paper or signatures alone, but because I had faced the shadow of betrayal, confronted the truth, and chosen courage over despair. I reflected on what I had learned. That strength emerges not from absence of fear, but from the willingness to act despite it. That integrity can appear even in strangers when those closest falter. That forgiveness is not weakness, but a conscious choice that frees the spirit. And that hope, fragile as it may be, is a thread that can weave through even the darkest days. The buyer's voice came back one last time before he left, warm and encouraging. You've done what few could. You've faced betrayal and you've acted with courage. The house is yours, but more than that, you've reclaimed yourself. I smiled, a quiet, steady smile that carried the weight of everything I had endured. He was right. I had reclaimed not just the house, but a sense of moral clarity, resilience, and hope. The path had been harrowing, filled with emotional pitfalls and moral complexities, yet through confrontation and deliberate choices, I had found redemption, not just in ownership, but in understanding, forgiveness, and strength. As I walked through the rooms, touching each surface with reverence, I felt a profound sense of peace. Betrayal had come, and yet it had been met with courage. Greed and fear had sought to dominate, but integrity and honesty had prevailed. And in that triumph, I understood something essential. Life may test us, people may deceive us, and circumstances may challenge us, but the choices we make, how we respond, how we confront, how we hold on to our values define the outcome. And for the first time in weeks, I truly felt whole.